Hey everybody, Michael Langley here. If you're watching this video, there's like an 85% chance that you saw my Doom remix, and now you are here. So I made another one. I decided to remix Death by Glamour from Undertale. Many of you probably know that game, and many of you who know that game, actually all of you who know that game, should also know that there's a pretty awesome song in it called Death by Glamour. It is the theme song for the boss Mellotron, which is quite a character, to say the least. Now, in all full disclosure, the theme is made by the amazing Toby Fox. I did not actually compose the music. What I'm doing is I'm simply taking a composition and adding my own creative liberties to it. What originally inspired me to do this was that one of my friends at university had discovered this amazing website that just has lead sheets of like literally every video game song known to man. If you don't know what a lead sheet is, it's essentially a sheet music transcription, but instead of giving you all the information, you're simply given just the melody and chord symbols, and they're kind of difficult to read if you don't know what chord symbols are. I saw that and I was like, holy crap, this is literally free transposition because, as some of you might know, in all the other remix shorts that I've done, I transcribe all that music by ear, and I was like, oh my god, that work's done for me. The hard part's done for me. I don't have to transcribe the music. So I was like, okay, this is a free, easy remix. Plus, I love this song. Now, unlike all my other remixes, this one will not be following the gimmick that is switching the genre. I just simply wanted to apply my own compositional style to this song. Anyway, enough backstory. Let's actually dive into the remix itself now. By the way, I'm recording this 2 days after I got my wisdom teeth removed, so talking feels weird, but I'm getting used to it. All right, right here we have the Logic session. This might actually be one of my largest Logic sessions to date, which is, it's because there's quite a few tracks. There's quite a number of tracks. There's quite a lot of Logic session to take apart here. But we're going to do it piece by piece, and by golly, we're going to get through it. We're going to get through all of it. So, the song starts off, as many of you probably know, with a kick drum and a solo piano. And the kick drum is just some random electric kick. There's nothing super special about it. Some random electric kick I found. The piano in the song is a very iconic piano sort of thing because it has a very dry sound, which is a fancy way of saying it just has the raw sound of the piano and there is no ambience coming from any sort of physical location. And how Toby Fox achieves this is in the sample of the piano, he takes the release, because there's different components to a sample. There's the attack, which is how quickly the sound takes to fade in. If I quickly demonstrate this for you, actually. So the attack is how long it takes for the effect to fade in. So if I put the attack's currently at 0, which means it comes in instantly. But if I put the attack up, the instrument's going to take a second to actually be audible. You see, it kind of fades in. It doesn't just instantly happen. It sort of fades, and I could even overdo this even further. So that's attack. And there's two other components called sustain and decay, but those aren't important for this video. But there's another one called release, which is how quickly it takes the sound to get cut off by the sampler. And most of the time you want the release to be fairly high because you want the sound to sound like it dissipates after you hit it. See how it doesn't quite instantly disappear? You hear a tiny moment after I let go of the note where you still hear a little bit more piano. Toby Fox does not do that. He eliminates the attack completely and has the piano simply stop the second the note is let go. With no decay whatsoever. And that's what he does with this piano, and that's exactly how I achieved it with my own piano sample. I simply just removed the attack from the piano. And then that same technique is applied to the second bass line. And then once again, a third time to this harmonic line. Once again, all the same piano sound in all three of these examples, it's just they're being overlapped so they're on separate tracks. So in the song, the first melodic instrument that shows up is this violin synthesizer that starts playing this nice calming, slower melody on top of all this fast-moving chaos. And this is the first element of my style. Part of my style is I really like to take the acoustic sound and mix it with the electronic sound and sort of create a blend of the two mixed together, which you'll hear a lot in this remix. And this is the first time I do it. I know this is originally a synthesizer, but I intentionally decided to make it sound more real for the sake of applying my stylistic choice to it. And similarly to this blending of acoustic and electric, the drum part, which picks up on measure 13, even though the kick drum is an electric kick drum, the other drums, the hi-hat and the snare, are actually acoustic samples. And I'm simply overlapping them onto this very aggressive electronic kick. I've always been a big fan of mixing the acoustic and electric sounds because I've always loved the sound of both of them. I've never really leaned towards one or the other. I really like how acoustic instrument sounds, and I really like how synthesized instrument sounds, so my brain naturally tells them to combine the two together. And while it is admittedly a difficult task, it can be done, and it sounds really cool if it's done right. And I've spent years getting pretty good at doing it. And then we have two different lead synths that appear after this violin melody ends. They're two different lead synths. There's a high one, and then in a later phrase it switches to a lower one. Both these synths I made from scratch in Logic's synthesizer plugin called ES2. I know this may look like a nightmare of a plugin to stare at. I mean, just look at it. Synthesizers are complicated. I'm still kind of learning the basics on how they work, but I've gotten good enough at them to the point where I can make them from scratch now. So I made these two leads from scratch using that same plugin. Let me know if you guys would like to see a synthesizer tutorial in the future, because I'm thinking of doing tutorials on this channel, and I'm thinking maybe synthesizers might be a cool one to do. All right, we're adding more color to my style, and once again, similarly to how I blend the kicks with the snares, the kicks with the drums with the acoustic electric blend. These piano parts, while they are technically sampled, as in they're meant to sound like live pianos, they don't really sound like real pianos because of what Toby does with that whole release thing I mentioned at the beginning of the video. They kind of sound fake. So in my eyes, this is the electronic element of this section. So I decided to layer it with these string timbres, these very fast staccato string timbres, to create the sort of layered sound of string and piano. If I go ahead and solo just the strings. And I'm using the same technique here because I don't want these to feel like they're too out of place. I do have the release on these instruments lowered as well. The nature of them sounds far more real than the piano does. It adds a very nice texture to the overall sound of the section. So this melody here, once we get past this melody up here, it switches on over to this melody. And this melody repeats itself. So I thought, okay, I don't want it to directly repeat. I wanted something else to happen the second time around. And the something else I've decided is to just, yet again, apply that layering technique with the acoustic instruments. And I want to pick an instrument that has a very similar sound to the synthesizer, kind of like a higher range, very short kind of sounding instrument, very scoot kind of sounding instrument. And I thought, what better instrument to occupy this role than an oboe? I mean, you can't say I'm wrong. This fits perfectly with this synth melody. And then finally, the very last element of this section is in the original song. After this melody begins, there is a synthesizer sound that kind of goes like whoop, whoop, whoop every other beat. But I decided to, instead of making it a sample, or like directly sampling it, I decided to make it this really, quite honestly, silly sounding trumpet slide thing. And that is the thing replacing the sound. It sounds really stupid when I solo it, but it sounds kind of cool in context, so I decided to keep it. Alright, next we move on to the B section. This is the first section that has an absurd amount of tracks in it, and I'll be getting to these in a moment. But this is my favorite part of the song. I know YouTube, a lot of like YouTube videos that I've seen that, you know, like how YouTube has that retention feature now. A lot of people, apparently to a lot of people, the favorite part of the song is the key change. I see that being the most replayed in most videos I see. But this is my personal favorite part of the song. This melody just kicks so much ass. So here we have yet another lead synth in ES2. This time I actually used the presets a little bit. I did alter it a little bit, but this one wasn't made entirely from scratch, only partially. And of course, you know, it should be a given at this point that I'm trying to achieve that electronic acoustic blend, so this melody is being doubled by the trumpet. Also, a little insiders as to how I usually get this technique to work is that I try to do something called blending, where I basically just create multiple instruments that are all playing the exact same thing. Like, they're not playing any variation of it. They're both playing the exact same thing with the hopes so that to the listener, the multiple instruments kind of combine into one homogeneous sound. And I think that's kind of cool when it does that, because it creates an instrument that you almost can't really quite make out what instrument it is. It's like a unique sound. It doesn't quite sound like one instrument or the other. It just sounds like a perfect blend of the two. And I like to do that specifically with acoustic and electric instrument, because it's really, if you layer them just right, it really is kind of hard to tell which one you're actually listening to, because you're listening to both at the same time. Here, playing the harmonic part, the amazing chord progression in this section, is the organ. Logic has spoiled me by giving me access to authentic recreations of vintage equipment, such as the electric piano, the clavichord, the Mellotron, and of course the organ, which is in this song. Now, I won't be covering all of those plugins today. I'll be covering 2 of them. They're basically authentic digital recreations of vintage equipment, so it's just a digital recreation of something that was originally a physical object. And it's really nice for people who create exclusively in the digital world in a DAW like this, because it gives artists creative freedom to use instruments that they might have never had access to if they just use this software. And I think that's kind of a neat thing for Logic to provide people with. The organ sounded really cool here. I just thought the organ would add a lot of intensity to the harmony of this section. Now that we're on the topic of the organ, I should probably bring up the synth bass, which is a synth that I've manually created in RetroSynth, Logic's analog synth plugin. Probably the easiest one to pick up. As you can see, it's not nearly as complicated as ES2. And this is sort of the really loud, really gritty kind of sub-bass. Yeah, that big booming bass that you hear in like all the big sections of the songs. And now is a good time to mention there's an effect on here that there's an effect on this instrument that I have not yet mentioned at any point in my channel, and that is called sidechain, also referred to as audio ducking. So you might notice that this instrument is sort of phasing in and out in volume. And that is because I have it sidechained to the kick drum. Now, sidechaining is an effect you apply using the compression plugin, and essentially what it's doing is taking the compression volume down from another instrument and applying it to the instrument. So in this case, I'm sidechaining the kick, so taking the volume down from the kick here and applying it to this instrument. In more simpler explanatory terms, it's causing it so that whenever the kick drum hits, it causes the volume of the other instrument to decrease slightly, which allows you to bring out the kick drum. This is mainly used in low-frequency instruments because low-frequency instruments have a tendency to not blend very well. If you layer too many low frequencies together, it causes interference that eventually leads to tearing of the audio quality because low frequencies are just that fragile. Sidechaining is a way of allowing you to layer the two by basically making it so only one can exist at a time, so that when one of the low-frequency instruments comes out, the other one goes away, so they kind of take turns occupying that space. And the kick drum is probably the most common instrument that sidechain is used on. And this is actually probably a very typical, like, standard application of it. Sidechaining the kick to the bass. The kick is a low frequency instrument, and the bass is a low frequency instrument. And most of the time, in most songs, they're both playing very prominently and very loudly. So having them exist at the same time can occasionally cause some tearing problems. So sidechain is usually used to avoid that. It also just kind of sounds cool. Some people just think it's just a cool effect because it gives the bass that kind of like wavy feel. It kind of feels like the whole song is pulsing up and down. To add a little bit of an acoustic spice to this section, I have a timpani and a chime, known famously in the cinema industry as the epic instruments, whatever the hell that means. So those are there, because everyone loves to hear those. So finally, along with the organ that's playing chords, in the actual song, there's an orchestral hit sound effect that plays at the start of every chord change. It's just a small attack that goes jum, 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 and it's just like an orchestral hit, like just an orchestral hit, like sound font or whatever. But I decided to be like mildly insane about it and like manually recreate the entirety of what that would be, which would be brass strings and woodwinds. So I manually recreated a 4-piece set of strings to play these chords. These are all individual instruments that are all occupying their own tracks. I made a string one, which consists of violin, viola, cello, double bass, a woodwinds one, which consists of bassoon, clarinet, flute, and piccolo, and a brass one, which consists of trumpet, tenor sax, bari sax, and tuba, and layered all of that on top of each other to get this. It is a ridiculous amount of work, I know, for something that's such a small element of the song, but I honestly think it paid off in the end. And that one choice alone is actually what caused a third of the tracks to exist. Yay for me, and yay for my RAM. On to the next section. So in this section, this is where the song kind of takes a break for a minute and sort of gives us like a chill elevator vibe. So I decided to kind of follow that exact scheme of that elevator music kind of thing and go for like very colorful sounding instruments. So I have an alto sax, a vibraphone, and a glockenspiel, which are playing the main parts. This part just kind of sounds like elevator music. That's just what it sounds like to me. So I was like, you know what? Let me just make it sound exactly like that in my version. And of course, we have the slap bass, which is from pretty much directly from the original song, except using my sample instead of his sample. And of course, the big part of this entire section, the part that I think is the big selling point, is the Mellotron strings, which is this instrument. Now, if you don't know what a mellotron is, first off, you're missing out. Secondly, a mellotron is sort of the OG sampler. Basically, at the very dawn of sampling technology, we essentially would sample things directly from physical objects, because if you guys don't know, back in the ye old days, we would record sound directly onto tapes, and then those tapes would be played back in the studio. And what the Mellotron was an instrument, essentially read tape recording, and allowed you to play specific parts of it. So it was kind of like the very first sampler, really, because that's what samplers are today. We take a chunk of a larger piece of audio and we play it in isolation. So the Mellotron was kind of the original sampler. Everything on a Mellotron sounds like it was made 100 years ago, and there's something about that that just sounds so awesome sometimes. Gotta add a little bit of the old to the new every now and again, you know what I mean? The D section, the last part of the song, is sort of the ultimatum of the song. It's this big epic moment where everything's in. So I decided to do the exact same thing. In my version, everything's also in. But because I did a lot of layering, that also means that it's a lot more complicated because there's a lot of in to everything. That made no sense. So the way I split this up is that there are two main parts happening in this section, and those are the two piano melodies from before. So the way I decided to split this up was I decided to, basically because this is the main melody, and this is the secondary melody, I decided to split it up so that there was one instrument in each section that was playing the secondary melody, and then everything else was playing the main melody. So if I just run down the list real quick, that's the synthesizers, which we have these two playing the main, and this one playing the secondary. We have the strings, same thing, 3 things playing the main melody, 1 playing the secondary. And then, of course, the same applies to the brass and the woodwinds. The one exception to this is, of course, all the miscellaneous instruments, which consists of chimes, the glockenspiel, the slap bass, and the vibraphone, which are simply all playing the main melody. By the way, guitarists out there, I know that slap bass isn't actually a slap bass. I just decided to call it that because it's a slap bass in the original song. I don't actually have a slap bass sample, I'm sorry. As sort of a final act, sort of finale kind of sound, I have incorporated this, my final trick, the final trick up my sleeve, the Ringshifter synth, and I'll just kind of like let it speak for itself. So let's actually dive into what's happening here. So by itself, it sounds like this. So let me explain what's going on here. I'm applying an effect to a synthesizer called Ringshift, and essentially what Ringshift is it's well, it's two things. I have two different Ringshift plugins here. Basically, what it allows me to do is it allows me to cause the synth, or the output volume in this case of the synth, to basically fluctuate at a certain speed, and I can adjust that speed with this massive dial here. So basically what I do is if I turn off the frequency shifter and use just the oscillating shifter, this basically makes it so that the volume of the synth is cutting in and out at a frequent wavelength, and I can make that wavelength either super fast or super slow. And that's what that one is doing. That's the ring part. And the shift part is the frequency shifter, which is the exact same effect, but it's being applied to frequency overtones, which is like secondary frequencies that are over the main pitch. So that one's essentially applying a dynamic filter effect that's being altered using this frequency shifter. And then I just put two of those on top of each other, and you get this mess. And all that's being controlled with simple automation. If I take both Ringshifter plugins off, you'll notice that this synth is literally just a regular synthesizer playing constant notes. Granted, it is super distorted, but I kind of needed to do that in order to make it audible. And at the very, very end of the song, everything kind of returns back to its bare bones form. So I decided to go back to my roots from the start and have the only instruments here being the pianos, and of course the original lead from earlier, although this time it's being doubled by by the other synth here. And then of course I brought the oboe back because the oboe was a prominent part of the first section. And that concludes my breakdown of this rather complicated remix of Death by Glamour. I hope you enjoyed listening to me banter about my compositional ways and styles and how I blend things together. Maybe you got something out of it, maybe you don't. Maybe you just skip to the part of the video where I play the entire song, which is what I'm about to do. I don't really care. As long as you got something out of the video, you know, if you enjoy the song, that's great. If you enjoy the process, that's even more fun, because I like talking about the process. I think it's fun to talk about the process. And now, without further ado, I'm now going to play the entire song uninterrupted. I can't wait to look at the retention chart on this video and see this is the only part people want to see. Last time around, I played it in literally just like an audio file, and I realized I have an editing software where I can like manually adjust what the playback audio is. I don't know why I didn't just make you look at the logic file. That was kind of stupid of me. So I'm gonna humor you a little bit by letting you look at something that's a little bit more interesting than just an audio file moving across the screen. So you get to watch the logic file scroll through the project. So it's gonna be it'll be a little more visually interesting than the last one. Alright guys, that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to like, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff that help improve my statistics. Do all the things. Check up on my community posts. I post stuff there. Alright, see you in the next one. Take care. Hopefully the next video is actually original music. The remixes are cool, but like, it'd be kind of cool if I made something else. Bye, see ya!